that this board is having heavy-handed, and I'm like, have you gotten to know these people?
Right.
No. So, I think that it helps. I want to. I've been talking to Craig about this, and I want to do a stocks exchange style listening session when we come back.
Yeah, you had said that.
Yes, I actually went and asked him if he would moderate it for me because I'm like, I'm new at this, you know.
Yeah, well,
So
yeah, and Craig and I actually talked about like how we 5:30. We called this meeting, the special board meeting of the Watertown Unified School District School Board to order. It is June 24th. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to
Join the meeting.
one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you take the roll?
Carl Schwarzy,
Here.
Dan Boltner,
Here.
Craig Wortman,
Here.
Charity Chandler.
She's online.
Yep. Tammy Fournier here. Lori Hoffman,
here,
Diana Johnson. She's still trying to.
It's still trying to get her joining.
Okay. And then Sam Owenu.
Sure. Excellent. So we are here to revisit our discussion regarding PRA. I do believe that the intentions of the meeting would be to come to some sort of agreement with three potential proposals to present to the public for consideration, so that we can start receiving some feedback from the public. Am I correct in that?
Yes, absolutely. That's going to be the biggest and main thing. If we can get some direction to present out to the public and get feedback from the public on those,
Right.
If we can narrow it down to what that might look like, that'd be great.
Right. And hopefully this discussion stays kind of focused around that particular objective, right? So without further ado, where do we go from here?
Well, we'll turn it over to our good friends from both Cullen and PRA, and they're going to lead us through a couple of different agenda items. You can see there that we're going to do some review of the Q&A, the questions and answers to those questions that you had from our last meeting. You gave us a bunch of questions, but we went through and talked through them together, made some answers. We're going to review those with you. And then we're going to revisit some feedback from that last May 27th special board meeting that we had. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what direction should the board have for us and moving forward. And then talk lastly about what do community engagement sessions look like. We have some tentative dates to put forth for you for some response to, as well as what you might want to see them look like. Okay. Dr. Thompson, tell you.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for presenting that, Lynn. Appreciate that. We're happy to be back with you this evening. I think you have met all of us and we have met you. Our partner, Nick Kent, is unable to join us tonight. He's working in a different school district in a very similar meeting elsewhere, and same with Doug. Has a different commitment, but Devin and I are very pleased to be back with you. And I will let Colin team.
Similar, I believe we've met everyone, but my name is Sean Cullen. Alex couldn't make it. Same old story and dance, song and dance, that she's working at another district right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Shayla Thompson, Overshare Milwaukee office. Right, house. Good to see you.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, we are here tonight. We've kind of already hit upon our agenda, so I won't belabor it. I think you're spot on with kind of what we're looking for to help us guide our work after we talk through some things, is really just to identify those top three options that the board would like us to continue to vet further and then perhaps take out for some community engagement. So that's where we're headed tonight. We are in the same phase. We always like to include this as a part of our slides just to kind of remind us or reground all of us. So we are still in that kind of overlaying mix where we're doing a little bit of shaping with concept development, but we're starting to work on what does community feedback look like. So that is where we were last time together, and that is where we are again this evening together, because those kind of go hand in hand for a part of this process.
As Dr. Burke mentioned, everybody should have got a couple handouts. Handout one is the first one that we're gonna look at. Perhaps they're in a full package.
They're in the board packet, but you do have one piece in front of you here that's also the building capacity discussions that we had a little bit of questions on last time, so we thought we'd bring that to you. But if you go into the information for tonight, Lynn, where were those three handouts listed for tonight's meeting?
So handout A is attached to agenda item
A.
A, yep.
And then handout B, which is under the B part of our agenda, and C is at the C part of our agenda. So that's logical. Way to go.
It works well. So hopefully everybody was able to preview those a little bit, little homework for all the board meetings that you have, obviously. I'm curious if I can open it up for any additional questions. Otherwise I could do a very general overview of what we talked about. Yes, we talked about a little bit of that, but not going into them specifically if we didn't necessarily need to. We answered many of the questions, but some of them we provided some additional follow-up or provided an answer to the question specifically if we weren't able to at the last meeting.
Why don't we give you about 5 or so minutes, maybe 10, to just read through those if you didn't have time to. I know we've all been like really busy in lots of meetings. So if you have some time to just take 5 minutes maybe or so, read through those really quickly, skim through them, go to maybe the question side, look for the questions that you brought forward that were burning for you. And then we can have some overall discussion if you would like.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Just about at 5 minutes. Does anybody need more time?
No. Are there any elements in there that anybody would like to ask a question about or discuss the answer or?
Yeah, thank you. This is very thorough. I really appreciate the work that you guys do here. I really do, because sometimes it's hard to zero in when people ask questions. I just want a little bit of clarification on question number 13, which I believe is the one I asked last time. So when we're looking at those maintenance costs, it says on the left-hand, in the left-hand column box, it says that the low end for how much maintenance is involved in options A through E totals out at about 61 million. That's what you're saying, correct?
Yeah, guys, which one of our firms answered that one on 13?
Pretty good. Shannon, you gotta look at the other information. Brian's looking at the right sheet.
Why don't you continue operating the building? Why don't you continue on, Sam, with your question?
Sure. And that is kind of in its entirety. I just want to make sure I'm reading things right. You know, I like to double check to the best of my ability. And so it looks like all of them turn out to be between 100 and I think 160 is the lowest if you take into account that 61 million for maintenance. I could be wrong though. It's really about the phrasing on question 13, which is page 4.
Yeah, what do the bottom line numbers show? Maintenance timeline, same as 20-year, 106 million, option A and E, A through E, excuse me. Low end total is 61 million. Improvements, variety of dollars. Still more to do in A through E, so maybe some more context on that. When we were discussing this as an option and looking at, what's the lowest dollar amount, and maybe that's something we do, or maybe we look at it differently, right? These are all hypotheticals, but all of the options that were presented, again, I said that I did the cost estimating on that because that was before our partners here at Cullen were a part of the team. So these are truly rough order of magnitude dollars just for comparison purposes.
Yeah.
And also reiterated, we need to understand what that maintenance overlap is. And really that's the direction that we're hoping to receive today, to find what are the top 3 that you would like to see taken to the next level, because then, hey, we're improving these spaces within this elementary school. Well, if you're doing something different there, then you don't need to do the maintenance dollars because you're already improving it. And maybe it's because we need a space for special ed that doesn't exist in the building, or maybe it's another administrator office because right now, they're just in a closet.
Yeah,
it can be just as simple as that. So
I think the one thing that we all really do need to be super cognizant of is that those cost estimates also are in today's dollars. Yeah. So that's if you do 100% of that work, of that whole option today, right? If you say we're going to do, part of option A, we're going to do phase 1, right? And you wait another 10 years to do phase 2 or phase 3.
Yeah.
That interest is going to compound over time. So that's not the cost. The cost over time may actually be more expensive if we wait on other phasing. And just be cognizant of that, because you might look at these and go, that's the cheaper option. And it might not be if 70% of the load is actually in years 10 or 15 or whatever, because the bigger part of that is going to be done at a much later time where more interest is going to be on top of that.
Yeah, I suppose.
So just something to think about.
And that is great information. I agree. I think that's really important. And the bottom line reason I ask it is because if we're just looking at a snapshot of the numbers as a rough estimate, and I really do understand what you're talking about, it's hard to set that stuff up, set that stuff up when you give a mouse a cookie, or that's probably not really it. You know,
Well, there's so many variables, and you're even picking up on that too. I can see it. We've even had the same conversation because everyone's asked me too, even in the community conversation. Well, how long does this plan get implemented? No one has the answer to that. It's dependent on so many different things.
yeah, and I suppose at the end of the day, what I'm looking at is every single one of the options. Not that there's no benefits to them, but options A through E are all at least twice as costly as the maintenance option is what is how it appears to me. And so that's where it gets difficult. And that's why I was like, well, when you take out some of that maintenance that would be done, maybe that would be a different deal. It gets complicated though. So that's just why I was asking. I really appreciate what you guys gave us here as far as the numbers go. It's just it's hard to say. And even when go ahead.
And something to consider also is, right, we wouldn't even, we're sharing with you what that total dollar amount for maintenance is. We would not recommend that you would do your 20 years of maintenance in one potential question to your community. That would be very silly because you'd be throwing away 10 years of, at a minimum, of useful life on those level 3 items. That would not be a wise move. So there's could be conversations at later dates. Is it level 1 only, right? Because that's out 5 years. Let's see what potential development is or isn't in the community. How is enrollment at that period of time, right? We're projecting out that long range plan, and again, it's something that you would strive toward, but something isn't just right. You guys said it, and it's etched in stone. It's something that has to be revisited over time. Yeah. Other questions? That was great. Thanks for asking it, and I'm glad we actually didn't have numbers on the left side originally.
No, thanks for the details.
Anybody else on handout A? And again, we just want to bring everybody kind of back to that conversation. I know there's a board member that's joining us tonight that wasn't able to be at that meeting, so hopefully bringing them along in that conversation. Okay, hearing nothing else, then perhaps we'll provide just a little bit more time again to bring everyone back up to the conversation in handout B. So also in section B of your board docs there, we summarized the discussion that we had around the different options. And again, just a general summation. I'm trying not to go into too much detail on stuff, but largely, this is what we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. So it's kind of just bringing us all back to where we were. Any thoughts on that document? If I even paraphrased it right now, right? The first bullet point is we talked about options 1 and 2, and maybe we didn't really hear a lot of support or a direct reason for why go down to 1 or maybe even 2, but there was a little more concern and conversation around 1 campus, right? Just with the amount of traffic that might be in 1 spot, even though we understand the geographic reach of what our 2 larger campuses are, high school and middle school. The second major bullet point, talking about refinement, right? We were talking about, well, maybe we need to do something at the middle school first. That's a little bit of what I heard. And does that need to be prioritized? Is there kind of a variation or an option in one of these needing to explore, maybe more than the 1 or 2 campuses And I think something that's rich within these options is that that timeline, that arc of completion. Honestly, if there is ever a completion of that, right? As it's a living document, things should be revised and revisited. You can start down the path of, say, 2 campuses, but you're gonna have 3 or 4 campuses available for a duration of time, and then it slowly will narrow down. So it still gives future boards flexibility. It's not that the decisions made or the suggestions, the options that you want us to explore further, set that so narrow, right? This arc of time gives opportunities to see how the community is changing. Then the last bullet point, funding. What are the funding possibilities? Everybody even got to, making sure we got a unified message about funding a plan and making sure that local businesses in the city were on board with that. Are there grants? What else is available to us? Is there free money out there basically that if we apply for it, could we be successful? And then that first one, which option will the community support? Ultimately, if something went to a ballot, the only way there's anything that gets implemented is if the community would support it, right? So that's what's the need, what's maybe the benefit to me, and then ultimately how much does it cost, right? Because that is an impact, that is a factor, and then also another factor here is, right, the district. Also, every district in the state for a K-12, so there's a debt limit, right, that you can't exceed. We're not even gonna get close to that, I'm sure. But just that's something that community has to be aware of too. Like, well, just do all of it. Well, that's might not even be in the realm of possibility, and it would be way out of anybody's willingness to support as well. I guarantee that. So that's kind of the synopsis. If I could have handed out.
Yeah, I also think that was great. I think this is a really good condensation of the feedback that you guys have gotten, and that I think what I'm seeing here is what I've heard as well. And I mean, this is definitely a question that kind of goes to everyone on the board, but I have not personally heard from anyone in the community that there's an interest in even starting down the path of that large scale change. And I think that people in the community understand what the benefits would be of a new facility. I think we all like having something that's new and fresh. But I think that with where we stand now, it seems like people are more interested in keeping, as it says, the neighborhood schools running as they are to the best of our abilities. And I think that that's something people value.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I'm going to have in that discussion point, and again, I'm totally okay with the answer either way, right? Is if we stay set up with the same number of schools we have, and you look at the seat availability that are in those schools because of declining enrollments, right? We have a total of 747 seats to the maximum delta versus the enrollment we have. My question is are we going to continue to put money into spaces knowing that we have way more space than we need to do the job that we need to do? And if the answer is yes, I'm okay with that, as long as you can convince the community that we need to keep putting money into these buildings that are way more space than we need. And if they're okay with that, then we have no problem. We will have the money to operate, and we will have a lot of space to spread out, and we can continue to run the way we're running. I'm happy to do that as long as that's what the community wants.
I think up until now, we have guessed what we think is good for the community and what the community might want, but we haven't asked them. And option A through E doesn't have any support that I can see. And rather than guessing what they want or telling them what's good for them, I think we need to lay out what do we have, what do we need, and let them tell us how to get there. And I think that's what we're missing here.
I would push back on that a little bit. because that's what we're trying to do. That this is that process. This is the process.
Going back to A through E.
Well, and that goes back to handout A, question number 2, right? That is, does the is the one campus model goal is that the goal? It wasn't then and it isn't now. Are we, if we're moving away from a 1 or 2 campus model, that's where we have the discussion. We should have that discussion here. The other part of this that I see is, my hope would be that we move forward, and as a board, our job is to start to initiate that discussion with the community. In order for us to initiate that discussion, we should have a few options as a proposal for the community to understand what might this look like, and then receive feedback from the community on that. So if one of the options is maintenance only, this is what those costs are going to look like to the community moving forward. This option would be more of a hybrid model where we maybe consolidate a few buildings and add on to another building to try to keep expenses within range. We know that maintenance only is 106 million. Is it, I shouldn't say only, we know that it's 106 million. Is there an option that allows us to be more efficient as a district, provide some of the resources to the community that they're looking for in programming and the space utilization at less, a lesser cost? Or what does that look like? And then what does maybe a consolidation into a couple of different sites look like? Because if we're not actually engaging the community on that discussion, how do we even know? We have to come to the community with a starting point.
Right, I just think their starting points, aside from the maintenance only, your starting point assumes a lot about what people want. And I think you're gonna end up with a failed referendum if you don't really dig down and find out what those options look like and how much they cost. And give the community a shopping list. They can choose what they want, and then we know what to send to.
I think you're stating exactly what we're trying to do tonight, right? Which is, we brought out to the best of the board's ability at that time, right? Who gave direction and said, here's what we think maybe the future should look like, right? We got some feedback from the community, right? And you are also now, as new members to the board, bringing even more feedback. And we're saying, let's shape those options. Tonight, we'd like to walk away with 3, right? We're not saying necessarily that they even have to be any of those. They may be something else that this board thinks is important to bring back out. But then we will bring those out to the community and say, we heard your feedback from the first round, and we have changed direction to this round, right? We need your feedback on this round.
Okay.
Right. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, right? When we're saying, give us that feedback, help us shape what the 3 options that we should be bringing out, right? We don't need to bring out 6 or 8 options anymore. We've heard from, a number of those options already that were focused around a 1 or 2 campus solution. And there was actually one that had a 3 campus solution that was like, buy some land for future use, right? But what I'd like to know is your feedback on those options that you've heard, as well as what other options are you thinking about and or hearing that we should have as one of those top 3.
I'm just thinking that choosing some options and solidifying them too fast is going to backfire, because we don't know what the community wants details wise. We know what they don't want, but we don't know what they want.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what Craig was trying. We got, then then it's incumbent upon us to give them a starting point and have some more reactions. We learn more, they learn more, right? And then we keep going with that back and forth until we really know what people want.
That sounds good.
Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying, Lori, and also I totally understand what you guys are saying as well. And I agree, you need to have something to communicate to people if you're gonna talk to them. And I think a lot of it comes back to, I still have this is from June 2024. This is from a year ago. This was way back when the board at that time was making decisions about what kind of long-range planning process they wanted to go through. And there was a strong desire to see maintenance and improvements because of the discussion at the time, being that maintenance ultimately is not necessarily going to be sufficient. That was the feeling of the board. And we also talked about having a district-led, community-led, or hybrid option. And so what I'm hearing from you, Lori, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you think that perhaps we should shift our focus on the process to being more community-led, even though that's taken a little bit of a step back and changing the way that we approach the situation, and having maybe a higher continuous form of community engagement. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So, and I hear where you're coming from, and I do think that would help out. So if we were going to shift to that model, as Lori is suggesting, what would be the best way to start shifting to that model and bringing that information? So like itemizing and bringing to the public, these are all the individual planning projects for just maintenance, and this is how much they would cost. Here are the 5 years, here are the 10 years, here are the 15s, here are the 20s.
Yeah, that's a good question for those we're asking to help lead us through that process. So I think it's a great question, and it's good that you identified maybe there's not just a shift in options, there may be a shift in approach.
Yeah.
And if there is a shift in approach, how do we retool this really quickly so that we can continue to move down that path?
Yeah, sure.
That sounds
So
wonderful. Thank you.
who would like to field that question from you?
I just got voted in.
Nice.
Yes. So there can be a range. And so maybe taking, again, a continuum of sorts, if you will, from what a hybrid, which is in the middle of that sheet. I'm sorry, I don't have mine here to hold up right now, but appreciate you bringing that out, to, you know, a very community-led process. So I do think that's something that the board would want to give some consideration to. So I'm going to give you some examples, if I can, of maybe bookends on the continuum from where we are like midline with kind of a hybrid approach out to what a most community-led process could look like. So on the most community-led side, excuse me, what is often done is that the school board creates what's called a facilities advisory committee. Some of them have different names. Some are FAC, some are community, facilities committee. They can have some different acronym, but basically it's a community committee of sorts. And they create a charter which outlines exactly what it is that the charge of that group looks like, because this is for case law and some relevant statutes. It is a subcommittee of the school board. And so it is chartered. And so it is often at that time, a co-chair selection process is then done, right? You take like applicants of people who want to be on this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's super selective in that way, but you are oftentimes in that circumstance looking to have different representation from across your community, right? So you probably want to have a certain number of slots. Like if you want a 25-person committee, because we know once we get beyond 25, sometimes things don't work great in committee format. So if you want about 25 people, you might be thinking, okay, right now we have 5 elementary schools, we have a middle school, we have a high school, right? So maybe there's 7 seats right there, and then you might be thinking, okay, at the community level, we have these different leadership groups, or we have these different entities we want to have represented, right? So you as a school board group, we're kind of putting together a charter that has seats, if you will, right? Because you are trying to truly have a diverse group of people who participate in this. And so then you put the all call out, and usually we see districts put an all call out announcing what this is with the board approved charter. So people are clear on what the expectations and time frame and all of those pieces are. Then what you do is you announce how you would like to pick co-chairs. Now, some school districts choose to have a school board person and a community representative as a co-chair. Others like to have two community-based people as the co-chairs, because again, this typically is a group, if it's truly community-led, which is the purpose of this, that are making a recommendation at the end of that process to the school board. Doesn't mean the school board has to accept it, but typically they're making a recommendation, often as a part of this community group's timeline includes kind of, I'll call it a timeout, where whatever their top options, almost like we're talking about here, those often then get put on a survey and tested, so that by the time this FAC or community group is making a recommendation to the board, there is truly community-wide data beyond just those able to participate in this committee. So there are variations on what I just described, you know, kind of how community-led, like I said, co-chairs can make a difference in that, membership makes a difference in that. Some have, you know, school administrators as a part. You do need district administrators. Often hold a lot of information, right? Think about Kevin's role and others who have vital information for the process to succeed. So that would be community-led. Those often need 8 to 10 months to run their course. So, you know, something to consider. So then with that in mind,
And I would even offer
Yeah.
a little ramp up as well, right? If you guys are developing
Yeah.
a charter and charge for this committee and
that's
that
probably
kind
a
of
2
thing,
to
so.
3 month ramp up. So think 12 months to have a recommendation in front. Thank you, Devin. So then as we kind of go maybe back a little more to where the pendulum's resting place in the middle might look like, that's where hybrid can look different ways. You could do what you're doing here tonight to perhaps give us direction around 3 options. And then as we're going to discuss maybe at the end, depending upon where our conversation goes, various ways that you can get community feedback, right? Those can be in face-to-face meetings. Those can be in other formats. You can hold small focus groups, more than 3 or 4 big sit and get kinds of meetings. There's a lot of ways you can do that. We've had districts who've done what we would call a community conversation series. So maybe school board reps. Oh, I know there was a conversation earlier about quorum. You have a non-quorum of school board people. You get people in different parts of the community, maybe 10 to 15 homes or businesses or places you can have a coffee chat. You can share out information and you can have people give you direct feedback. But you're going to their home turf more so than saying, hey, we're going to have these 2 or 3 come to us. This is the schedule, right? You can make sure you have some of those in those 10 so that you have a guaranteed space, place, those kinds of things, but you can also actively search out other places where people may feel more comfortable, you know, going to their neighborhood or their friend's house or something like that. And explain those things in depth and have, you know, again, people there to get good information. So I would say that's, you know, there's quite a range when you think about hybrid. And then you're bringing that back and the board is using that to make decisions before you get to a point of a community-wide survey.
And as a follow-up, sorry, I'm asking a number of questions. I'm trying to kind of zero in on some of this. And we've already done some of that over the last year, correct? We've already done quite a number of those small groups. Jared, we've talked about that.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go right
We
ahead.
did, so for this process, we joined, so we were with the board on January 17th a year ago.
Mhm.
Then 3 days later, we were in front of the strategic planning group and got some feedback there. But then it was those 3 days in December when they saw the options. So in June, we were getting broad feedback.
Yeah.
Responding to the options that we're talking about here, A through E and the maintenance option, that has happened 3 occasions, well, 4 if you first count staff, and that was that first week of December.
So then, and again, please, I apologize for the continued questions. Would it be reasonable in kind of that continuum of community involvement, now that we've gotten some feedback, we've kind of zeroed in on those A through E's and the maintenance, and we've heard some more feedback on what those look like, would it be feasible to open it up to more of a community-led process from this point forward and try to refine out of those and see what the community thinks about altering those aspects through more of a like a community committee, like you were talking about? And what are some of the potential issues that come along with doing that?
I would say anything is of course possible.
Mhm.
I think What I feel like I heard you mentioning, Lori, is more of a ground up process. And I think that's where in communities where they've done the more community led process, I was describing the FAC or CIC or whatever you'd like to call it. They go back and when we think about the school board presentations and meetings and engaging with that level of information, literally we spend a good couple meetings going through. So like the first meeting is going through the nuts and bolts, sorry, it's this one, the facilities, the HVAC, the MEPs, like all the maintenance items. And then like a second meeting, we're talking about the teaching and learning side of it. So the educational adequacy, I'm holding this up actually in this volume. And so we're looking at that. And then we're looking at other data the district may have around student achievement or a programmatic aspiration, like, right, with maybe we can't offer the sections of some program we really want to because we don't have the space. Or, right, so we usually are building a considerable amount of background. I'm not saying no to your question. I'm just saying it takes a lot to, I think, get to a place where you have non-staff members who can engage at the level that you need them to refine some options if you don't bring them through the whole process. You know, but I do think, you know, kind of if you're asking if there's a hybrid way of doing it from this point forward that's leaning more towards the community side or community led than maybe where we had been in the last year. Absolutely, I think there is. You know, and I think that looks like the board refining some things and then, you know, deciding, is there another round of staff input before, you know, things get worked through? Is there a cursory student feedback that's gleaned? You know, there's other ways to get some information to start honing in, I'd say.
Yeah, from the beginning, I was always concerned about like, what the appetite for the community was going to be to move forward with any type of building whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I also understand that there are some parameters that we know are non-negotiable. And we should probably start with those. Some of those non-negotiables are, we don't have a choice when it comes to maintenance. And we know that we're going to be faced with a significant amount of maintenance in the near future. We need a plan around. I also believe that if we come to the public without any type of additional plan, you're going to be scrutinized because you're coming to the public and asking them for feedback without a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a cyclical argument. People want to have some visuals sometimes to understand, okay, well, what does this look like? You know, we've already started along that process a little bit. We've done some of the definition as far as what the maintenance is in our buildings. I'm hoping that we can maybe come together and say, what if, let's just say we're looking at the cost per foot maintenance, right? I think that's a question number 6 on the A handout. Okay, so we take the bottom 3 of the highest expense schools offline, and what does that look like as a district if we can absorb those within the district? And does a modest remodeling project at one of the buildings, well, how does that look in long-term savings to maintenance costs? You know, for a long-term outlook for the community. Maybe that's the type of approach that we throw out to as a starting point. You know, does that mean that we build another building to replace the 3 buildings that we're taking offline? Does that mean we add on? Does that mean we just absorb them all within the district? But knowing this, we can't absorb the bottom 3 without doing something different. We have to make some sort of an adjustment somewhere, and that costs money. So I agree that we need to have more community input on this 100%. I've always felt that way. I think that what we're seeking tonight, what PRA, Cullen and superintendent are seeking is a level of understanding from this board, what's next. And I don't know that I'm not there yet with a complete ground up starting.
Join the meeting.
Okay, so I guess I have a couple questions
Sure.
for whoever can answer, right? Cause I'm new to the process. I wasn't here for any of this. So I guess I would like to know why everybody thought that is the only option available in the long term to build a new facility? Because the only option available that does not build a brand new facility is the maintenance only option. So I'm just wondering, what did the board feel? Yeah, go ahead, Jared.
So I can answer that. You're right in that, the only option to keep all of our buildings the way they are is maintenance only, right? But I will tell you that even in that option, you still have improvements. You still can make improvements to our existing buildings as they're structured. And it would still be a maintenance and improvement. You would just be looking at improvements that would get towards the programming that we have better. I've said many, many times, putting our most technological type skills and programming into one of our oldest elementary schools with stairwells and other things that make it really difficult to do a lot of things was an interesting choice. But Lincoln as a building may still fit that need if we did some improvements to get more towards the kind of programming we're doing there.
Okay, so
I would even say, LEAP has, a great program. But there are still things that out there would enhance their programming the way that they're doing it, right? And it's not just maintenance, but it would be maintenance plus, right? What we're trying to get to in our questions is it maintenance only or is it maintenance plus? And if it's maintenance plus, where does the plus happen? Craig's talking about a plus that would essentially be maybe a reconfiguration of a standing building or an add-on to that standing building. So that way we could shift the number of seats available, right? To maybe take some other buildings offline that are older and would need some inputs on them. Right? And that's what you put out there. That's what
More or less, yeah.
So there's plenty of options out there
okay.
for us to think about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I'm feeling like if we're gonna bring this to the community, I'm not opposed to that. I think that's a great idea. Whatever options, and I don't think we should willy-nilly put it out ground up like no choices at all, right? Like that, if you don't give any direction to somebody, they're just gonna sit.
Sure.
But there needs to be an option where we renovate our current buildings, only because when I've spoken to community members, I didn't live here 8 years ago when there was a referendum where the community voted to pass a referendum to improve these facilities. And now it hasn't even been a decade and they're not very comfortable with us going back out to them saying, hey, can we have this large amount of funding to build a brand new building? Now, maybe 8 years ago, they attempted to get the community to buy into building a brand new building and they didn't. I wasn't here for that, but from what I hear, when I say, well, yeah, we're discussing long range facility plans, they're like, well, we just had a referendum less than 10 years ago where we gave millions of dollars to the district to improve our current structures.
Yeah, no, you're right. I agree with you. I think the one thing that we don't always hear is if we go out to the public and say, oh, we need, let's just say we need $40 million to improve the high school now. It's a 30-year-old building. And you're still gonna get pushback on that one thing alone because it's not been communicated yet to the public that, yeah, this is a building that needs maintenance. That's beyond what we can sustain in a regular budget. So, but you're right. Absolutely right.
And when you said seats, you were talking about increasing the class size. And when you increase the class size, that impacts the quality of the education. And so that has to be an integral part of this conversation with the public. are we looking at increasing the class size when we're doing this? Because that's what I'm hearing.
I hear your concern, and I think that, that's been probably part of the entire discussion, regarding the
Can I answer
Yeah.
that? So, really, that deals to two things, right? The amount of budget we have available for staffing, right? And secondly, your threshold at which you want to put money into, any renovation. For instance, we don't have to necessarily, make any changes to class size if we have the total number of classrooms available to stay at the same class size. Right, but we still have to have those number of classrooms available in whatever we do,
Right.
right?
It has to-
And we also have to continue to have the money to be able to afford the staffing to go into those.
Right.
If we don't have the money to go into the staffing, yes, class sizes will have to go up.
Right, and we have to make this part of the conversation with the cost.
So a shift in building usage doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have higher class sizes. It could mean it, but it doesn't have to mean it.
I think we need to upfront communicate that with every option. What is the class size intended? What is the cost associated?
Yeah, and again, part of that would depend on what our operating budgets are. Because I will tell you, if we don't pass a referendum, you are not gonna have a choice on that. Class sizes will go up. There's no choice, because you can't run at a deficit. The state does, they say that's illegal, right, for a school to do that.
Right.
And if we continue, they'll come in just like they did to Milwaukee and Beloit, and they say, no, we're going to help you rectify this, and if you don't, we won't give you aid until you start turning the corner. Right? And you can put it all on the local taxpayer. That's what they're doing other places. I'm not using that as a threat. I'm just telling you what the lines are, right? And so if we do have money to operate, right, and we have the community pass a budget that allows us to continue to have our seat size the way we have it, that's great. Then we talk about the next step, which is, now, do we want to reconfigure our buildings, or do we want to stay in the same buildings?
Right, but we need to clearly communicate that, because
Yes.
that has been a point of contention with people, that we continuously talk about increasing the class size in this conversation, and it frightens people. And I think we need to be very clear about what options come with what class sizes, come with what cost.
Um, if I may, kind of a thought here. So it doesn't directly answer the question you just raised. We did, when we initially did the study a year ago, we did take a bit of opportunity to speak with your staff. So at the very end, I mean, it's not something that we would probably take the time to look through too much now, but if you haven't had a chance to look at the analysis of programming and learning spaces, it starts on page 436. That does go through and does provide a snapshot of each different programmatic area. And it doesn't directly answer some of the questions you're raising now, because it's the nexus of what is needed to run a good art program, which is not taking into account what the district's financial ability to run a good art program is from an operational standpoint, right? There's the facility side, which is what some of these options would address. But there's, I think, what Dr. Burke is talking about, which is, you know, there's also the operational side, which is if we can't afford, because of our budget due to, you know, revenue limits, all the constraints that come into school finance, then you can have the best facilities in the world, but you can't necessarily have the program you want to have, if that makes sense. So that's where I think we want to definitely work with you to figure out what are a range of options. 3 would be great. If there's plus or minus on that, we're here for it. But I think that's where trying to start getting at what are those different things that could look like, the things that we're hearing you talk about right now with our conference. Oh, and maybe one other thing, since I know you might also be interested in, just before those pages, we did a staff survey a year ago. And so that starts, it's right before it. So it starts on page 427, well, really 428. And so by school, like for instance, on page 428 is the Douglas Elementary School staff survey results. So it gives you a little bit of information about who filled out the survey. I do apologize, it's a little bit small. But at the same point in time, you can see how did people rate the building that they work in every single day. I will call your attention, I noticed this error today, I'm really sorry, I don't know how this happened or how it didn't get caught before. On page 432, it says it's Schurz, it is Webster. There are two Schurzes, but I did go in the file today and double check. So it truly is alphabetical and the one is mislabeled as Schurz, but it truly is Webster State and I did look today.
Because it is a little small, right, we looked at spaces, what are the acoustics, what's the accessibility, the appearance, the power, do we have enough power to do our core job and support our students? Flexibility, furniture, lighting, artificial, right, so above us right now, or versus natural daylight, we had that conversation actually, about the middle school, and then, what's the size of your room? Also, building indoor features, just what are the things that are in the building? How do you assess those as a staff member? And then as well, right, we need to have outdoor facilities for our kiddos as well. Like, right, we mentioned Lincoln before. If there's a potential addition or there's improvements at Lincoln, that takes away from what already is a small site. Or at Lee, perhaps, if the addition or improvements at that building, that's the ag program. We would love to support that for more students, but every square foot of exterior takes away some. Now that's a half section program. Hold it down maybe. So anyway, I just wanted to, because it is hard to read or it's small, just to make sure that we understood like what's the depth at which we looked at. Are we just looking at pretty colors on here? Do they actually mean something? It means something with the data that we put. So
She's trying to
I'm sorry,
advance.
it's switching, it's toggling between your two Zoom things, it's not
Right.
on the slide. So it keeps, sorry about that, so if I'm unmuting or muting, I apologize.
So we're not stifling any conversation. What we wanted to do is maybe just move ahead a couple slides and say like, okay, let's reframe the conversation again, because we're starting to have some really good dialogue. And if we need to review the options, we can, but I guess let's at least kind of progress through them. And then let's have that rich conversation. And then I know that we've got through all of our slides and nothing was missed to potentially share with you at all.
So what is up here now? So the board direction piece, I think what we're just, and you saw this last time, so we don't necessarily have to take your time at this moment to go through it. What we did do is based on our conversation 3 weeks ago, we just took off the preamble of everything that had happened, because last time we were together, it was just tracing that history for everybody, as well as prospectively what we thought we heard you saying. And so now what we've done is we've just shortened that up. So it really does start at the top. That's this handout C. It just starts kind of where we all started together last month. Again, it does presume something happening in April of next year. That is not a requirement by any stretch. It's just, we also didn't want to have it stretched to some further date and then it takes us by surprise and we're maybe not moving as quickly to certain phases as we might need to, depending upon what you would like.
What we see as our job is giving you options.
Right.
Right, so whether it's the plan options or, well, if we were to go to the community, well, this is like the earliest that you could. Whereas if we didn't bring this up tonight or at other moments, then we might miss it by like a month. And then you all honestly might be upset with us that we didn't make you aware. So this is just making you aware. We're not committed to anything or anything like that.
I guess I'm just gonna ask the most elephant in the room question. Is everybody comfortable with doing 2 referendums on the same ballot? Because we are most certainly going to be discussing the operational referendum going on the ballot next spring, correct?
That is a good question. Are we going to discuss an operational referendum? I mean, because I don't know that we've even really discussed that. And I know you're not taking action on any items tonight, but
Are we allowed to discuss whether to talk about the operational referendum? It's not really on the agenda.
I mean, no, we can't, but the idea of a discussion about when we might do this, you have to almost identify that a little bit. Because it may inform this.
Yeah.
Right, and you're not setting out to discuss the operational referendum and whether or not we're gonna have one. But you're trying to have some discussion around, are we gonna have a capital referendum? And that may lead you to questions about an operational referendum. Should we do one or not? Right? If it's presumed we're doing one, then you have to answer the question, are we gonna do two?
I really do think that what it comes down to is I haven't heard from a single person in the community so far. And of course, I'm only one person. I only hear from who I hear from. I haven't heard from a single person that there's an appetite for building, for add-ons, new buildings, anything like that. It seems to me that regardless of any other thing that's going to be on the ballot in the spring, it does not seem to me like people are interested currently in the community in having that sort of discussion. Now, a capital referendum could include maintenance only, correct? And
Or maintenance and improvements to the existing structure for programming type purposes.
I don't know that at this point, that's something that the community is interested in either. I think they would be more interested in that than the consolidation options from what I've heard. But I think even then, what people are looking for is different kinds of change in the district, different directional changes and not necessarily changes in the buildings. And I think that contributes to both that we get about a capital referendum and about an operational referendum. And I have mentioned that a few times, of course, but I think that until that really, there's a strong effort there. Not that there hasn't been effort, don't get me wrong, but until there's a really strong, clear effort there, I think it's going to be difficult to move forward with anything that we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, I do want you guys to know that, and I'm not suggesting this is an option. I just want to lay it on the table because like you guys said, you don't necessarily know. There are some school districts out there who talk about a capital referendum, right, to restructure to get to a lower operating referendum. And they sell the lower operating referendum by saying it comes with an accompanying capital referendum that will restructure us so that we can be more efficient with budget later on. So if that's something you're thinking of, I just want you to understand that some school districts do that as well. And there's plenty of other options that they could probably throw out there too that they've seen.
I have a question about when is the midterm elections? Is that not this next November?
November from now. 20, yeah.
So assuming that we were to put a referendum on in April, we would have one other opportunity that year, 2027, to put another referendum on ballot. I think that gets a little tricky, you know. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if you or Carl or Charity and Diana had any community feedback.
Well, if you can go back to last April, there were so many questions that people had in mind, economy wise and so forth. I think it's gonna be a different April this year. And I think people would have more of an appetite to pass a referendum if we frame it correctly. So there's a lot that's gonna happen. Carl, are you seeing any indicators?
Well, I've done business in Watertown for 40 years. At one time, there was 60-some licenses, liquor licenses in Watertown, and I covered 26 of them, and I took care of their books for it. So I have a very good feeling about Watertown. A very good feeling. I don't live in Watertown anymore because it's a city that absolutely upset me when I had to get my dogs out of town. I like to hunt and I have dogs, and they didn't appreciate my dogs, so I left the community, moved outside of the community. But this community, to be honest with you, is very, very cheap. And we gotta work off of that basis. And then we gotta go from there. I don't think they're gonna pass anything, to be honest with you, until we're forced to.
Carl, have you heard any feedback from anybody?
Oh, yeah,
about
they definitely,
not
with schools, they definitely don't, they want their neighborhood schools. I'll call it neighborhood, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
They want the schools we have now,
Yes,
right?
they want the schools in the neighborhood.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that real quick?
Go ahead.
Is there an interest among those people to approve of a capital referendum to
No.
ensure that those schools stay there?
Well,
If the
that,
choice is between
that way they probably go along with it
Yeah.
to maintain the present schools.
Mhm.
And this one campus, first of all, the traffic problems. We'd have to go to the city with one campus. Because I lived on Hall Street, right by the junior high for 20-some years. And you couldn't believe what it looked like in the morning and in the evening. To start out with, it was great because all the kids walked to school all the time. And then all of a sudden, the parents start picking them up and taking them. Right, Dan?
Yeah.
And then it became a cluster. So. And that's the main thing is gonna be the traffic problem, which is gonna have to be coordinated with the city.
Yeah. We like to explore a lot of options early on, because it costs like, oh, right, it still costs a couple of bucks, but it's really cheap versus just building something and also discovering you have an issue, right? So we want to explore it, understand, get that feedback, and if we want to move on from that option, that's wonderful. And now we've just narrowed it down even further. I just want to follow up on the referendums, right? So per calendar year, you're allowed 2 questions. It could be a capital and an operational on the same ballot, or it could be 2 capital, 2 operational, like however you want to dice it, but only 2, and only during the elections. I think that's kind of a great segue, I guess, back to identifying kind of what our top priorities are, because we from the people that we did hear, and what you guys shared last time, you're gonna have to engage the city. What are those neighbors gonna be thinking about with all these cars at multiple times? Great, that's wonderful. You want to stagger the start time. Well, what if a parent's dropping off a high schooler and a middle schooler, or now the middle schoolers are loitering around the middle school because the high schooler dropped them off, right? They're gonna carpool. People gotta work. I gotta go to my job. So that gets us right back to the options. And does anybody have a strong feeling for a one campus?
Hold on before you answer that.
Yeah.
Charity Chandler's wanting to share some thoughts.
Thanks, Jared. And what I'm hearing is that people are feeling pretty passionately that are sharing, my fellow peers and board members, about the maintenance and what they're hearing in the community. And Jared, you had mentioned the idea of a maintenance plus. As we're trying to limit what those options are, I'm hearing a lot of trepidation around the one campus model. And if we're looking to take multiple ones in front of the community, whether it's 3, whether it's 4, whatever that looks like, then do we say a maintenance plus, and a 2 campus model just to get a vibe for what people are thinking? Because we're hearing anecdotal evidence, but if we're looking to ask more folks in the community where they stand, we know that our community will be very strong in their opinion and share with us if it's something that they feel a sense of pride about, or that they feel really strongly about from a potential tax implication perspective. So I guess I'll just throw that out there for conversation to say, if you had to pick gut reaction right now, recognizing it's not binding, what are you all leaning toward from a board perspective?
Can I chime in before we do that?
Please, friend, of course.
Oh, just give my input. The conversations that I've had with people, similar to what Carl had said, very frugal, don't want taxes to go up, but they're also beginning to see the need, as Jared said, that there's a need for change, there's a need for improvement, that continuing to do what we've been doing isn't working in terms of maintaining our schools. They also had very, very strong feelings that 2 referenda, or even talk about capital and operational, was very confusing. Many thought they were voting on both right away, weren't sure, because it had come up through pieces of the discussion. And so clarity around what we're talking about is going to be huge. The community also hasn't really seen statistics or data on what those various options mean in terms of their pocketbook, in terms of programming. as was discussed a little bit earlier, where we are from a budgetary standpoint, class sizes are going to go up. Where we are from a budgetary standpoint, there will be some school closings based on need. I haven't run any individual numbers myself. It's not my job, but I don't know how we can cut 1.5 million, then I don't know how we can make those huge of cuts without doing something bigger. I don't want to see jobs lost. I don't want to see programming changed. I just don't know how we can make the cuts we need to without doing something bigger. And then it comes to the question of, if you go with maintenance plus, one thing we talked about through referendum planning last year is, what is the price tag on that? While that seems very feasible from an objective lens, when you look at the cost to doing that over time, is that really our best option? So looking at that full picture, again, I think it was Carl that said many don't realize the need yet. I think something to the effect of, it hasn't really hit rock bottom. And until they see the overall need, I don't know what the appetite will be. There is still the conversation of, can we build onto this school or that school, and what can we do? But we haven't really talked about, okay, I know LEAP comes up as a common conversation. Okay, I've been out there. There's a lot of green space there, wonderful. But I also look at how run down that school is. How much is it going to cost to upgrade where that is, to even do an addition on there? Is that even feasible? And I appreciate the cost per square foot that was shared within those particular options. Lastly, and I don't have the exact numbers, Jared, you can speak to this better, but when we talked about what the referendum ask was going to be last year, we bounced between numbers, 7 million, 6 million, 9 million, 10 million. How long do you ask? What do you ask for? And we came up with the most cost efficient ask that we could, knowing that if the referendum failed, that the next ask would be greater. And we're seeing that now. And that communication piece to the public is also going to need something visible, because as they come back to ask, wait a second, is this ask really greater? You've had these conversations at the last meeting, et cetera. These are all pieces that, to say, how does the public feel right now? I'm not sure they have the full picture. We've heard bits and pieces, but I think this needs to come to the forefront again, because that was the conversation before the failed referendum. That was the conversation where there wasn't the reality of, all right, we just cut how many jobs? All right, there's this many more on the table. This is starting to become a reality. And so I think that there will be some different, there will be a bit of a different appetite. What that exactly will look like, until we paint a more clear picture, I don't think we can answer that question.
Two fair points. Yeah, I honestly think that the best path to move forward now would be to set aside discussions about larger scale facility planning. Make it very clear that our discussions at this time are focused on operations, and revisit this after we are at a point with the community where they would like to continue operations, before we're talking about capital. I'm not sure if there's any other path forward with what I'm seeing. Sorry.
Does part of me, I agree with everything Diana just said. And part of me looks at it like, at some point we have to start beginning some planning. Whether or not that means that we go to the community at this point this year with an ask, or if that ask happens to be a year from now. But planning has to start at some point in the situation where, and maybe there could be a couple of different scenarios where, okay, if referendum doesn't pass at this point in time, then we have to consider kicking this out at a different time. But we still should start planning because we know there's expenses on the forefront that we have to consider. That's just my opinion. And it takes time to communicate that out to the public. You know, the needs that we have.
I completely agree.
I'm not opposed to planning. I'm not feeling very comfortable if we went into the hypothetical scenario where there's two questions on the ballot where we're asking for operational and capital referendums. That would not make me comfortable.
Okay, so let's just assume then that we're planning out for a future when it comes to a particular improvement plan for a district.
Could we potentially plan it like this? You guys could tell us too, where we could come together on 3 options that we think might be good for the community. We work towards getting those options prepared. We hypothetically go to referendum for operations in April. If that passes, can we then consider putting a out of norm November referendum in to see if the community has an appetite for capital referendum? If you can put 2 questions in every calendar year, I don't know if that's allowed or not to span it across 2 election cycles.
You said that, I think you said that the midterm elections are in 2027.
2026.
26.
Oh, okay, 2026.
November 2026.
Yeah, so you could do 1 question per, and I do think that seems to make the most sense, but I think it's important that we focus on 1 question at a time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we just hold.
So I understand what you're saying, and I do have concerns putting 2 on, but what if we, from this point moving forward, we adjust the timeline that you gave us, where we would go to the community for referendum in November instead of in April. And that way the timeline's adjusted appropriately, and if our community does like the way that, please go.
I just really need to flat out say this, and I don't know how to get this across to the community, but we're in a funding deficit model from the state. And we need to do both. We need to have operational dollars to continue to afford our teachers and programming, unless we want to drastically change our programming, which also drastically means changing number of kids per classroom, supports that they have, everything else. We also need to maintain our buildings. We have systems that are starting to fail that are identified in that manual, right? And a timeline for continued maintenance over the next 20 years. So, like, I have to say this, we do need to do both. I just don't know when, and I don't know how, and I'm trying to get the plans in place to meet the needs of our community, but we need both.
To speak to both your points, people still call it the new high school.
Mhm.
And that was 21 million without a pool, right, Carl? Isn't that it?
That's about it, yeah.
It'd be 60 million today. Oh, it's more than that?
Oh, yes.
Way more than that now. Like 120.
So,
Well, my point is that the longer we wait, the more we spend. I mean, so we do have to do some advanced planning. And at least get some of the footwork done
so
before we can make
Can I ask a
decisions.
quick question, Jared, for these?
I don't know, oh, go ahead.
Okay, so Jared, you had made mention that you had reached out to the community about their feeling for support to help fund the bill. Is that, I understand that there was nobody that's confirmed or verified that they would, but what sort of temperature are you getting from business owners
Yeah, so
to participate in the funding of?
yeah, so we had invited not only business CEOs, but also people like Mr. Benson from the Benson Foundation was there. Our Senator Jagler was there. The then mayor at the time, Mayor McFarland, was there. and we just took them on a tour of the high school and we said, we're gonna have some needs, right? But we also want to know what we're aiming towards. What do you see as us aiming towards helping to prepare people for your facilities, the kind of work that they're going to be doing in our town, right? And then we talked about, like, if we were to make some changes, what would be your appetite to help us out with that, for monetary support? All of them said that they would be very interested in helping, but they're not going to lead the change and they're not going to take all of the change on. They want to be the extra special things that will make that community really shine after they realize that the community is really behind the schools and what they want to do. They're not going to invest in something that they don't think the citizens are invested in. If they think the citizens are invested, they will be very happy and very generous to add the icing on the cake.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Coming from a politician, I can understand that.
Well, no, I mean, I would tell you that came mostly from the business owners,
Really?
mostly from the business
I
owners.
should expect it to come from the politicians more.
So I've heard a similar thing in other communities where, well, I'm not gonna put up my 6-figure donation or even 10 or $20,000 donation. It is the stuff on top, or I wanna buy that piece of X that you need to outfit and give this kid additional benefit, because he's gonna, they are then gonna come and potentially work for me, right? They're getting some on the job training while they're in school.
So I'm thinking, in response to kind of where this has gone, why don't we, if you all still have a little bit of time, I know Dr. Burke had to leave us. But we
Jason,
really would
Helm is yours.
love to, continue the conversation and see if there is direction from the board around options at all. But I guess what I was gonna say about the timeline is we can certainly also develop what a November timeline would look like. And you don't have to make a firm choice, right now, but as things evolve over the next 2 to 3 months, then you can see what those things look like. Because I think it depends back to the original, well, I call it the original, it really isn't original, but the chart, right, that was referenced earlier in the meeting. I think another thing that maybe isn't going to get sorted out fully tonight, but what does community engagement fully look like? Because what I just heard you bring up, you couldn't probably do a survey and the things you'd need to do if you hadn't already started before your April referendum to be ready, because you have to vote to put something on the ballot. I believe it's August 25th.
Okay.
And it's somewhere in there for that November 26th that we're talking about. So you still have, that's the tricky part, right? Is backing these things up to when the board actually has to take action is in advance quite a bit. So I think what we want to do is, we'll take the time to build out what does November will look like, and then maybe we'll share that back out with you.
Okay.
You would then need to decide, okay, so then what does that tell us about community engagement? To what extent is it a community led on that kind of continuum we talked about? And then you can talk further or think further about a lot of the concerns we heard raised, or, sometimes it can be confusing for the community when we're talking about operational things and facilities. So what does some of that need to start looking like? Did you wanna?
I think there was a question, Lori.
Okay, I know, I didn't want to facilitate, Jason wanted to facilitate. If you want me to, I'm happy to.
Somebody.
Yeah. And then, yes, absolutely want to get to you. Miss Lynn, can you get us back here? Thank you. So I will totally take what you guys are saying. I think just as we do this, before we hear from you all, if it's okay, were there any further questions or things? This is all what we went through together last time before we hear from you and then get into the options. It just was really meant as placeholders in case people had questions before we talked about the options, or be able to refer to them during this. So nothing on here is different than what you saw the last time. Okay, so I don't know who was first. I saw it was Hoffman and Mr. O'Neill's. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's Dutch.
O'Neill.
No need.
How do you pronounce it?
O'Neill.
O'Neill. Thank you. I will do better. I don't know who had
Don't
their
worry about
hand
it.
raised.
Sometimes I can barely pronounce it. Yeah.
So my comment was not a question. We often don't realize that these board meetings are available to the public and now we put them on YouTube, right? Right?
Soon.
Soon. Anyways, we should be putting these on YouTube. And sometimes we
I think we are.
forget that,
Some of them are uploaded. Yeah, we'll be going live soon.
yes, sometimes we forget that the capital, we throw around these terms that are very confusing to the public. And whether we realize it or not, we're making a case one way or the other for this referendum to the public right now as we speak. And I think it's important to note that we need to clearly define for the public what an operational referendum versus a capital referendum is. My understanding is an operational referendum is the day-to-day expenses that we need to function. Capital referendum, even though it has a fancy name, is the expenses that we have when we replace a roof or do large improvements to buildings that are absolutely necessary for big maintenance items. Am I correct?
I would suggest that we get the statutory definitions of those. You are very close. I think where this gets super confusing, and I really don't want to confuse people at home listening to this, is that you can't use capital operation referendum dollars for anything except capital improvements. However, you can use operational dollars towards capital improvements. That's where, yes, so like you could
Replacing the
actually,
roof.
correct, and that's where I think it gets extra confusing. So that's where I was just saying, maybe, I agree with you 100%. I think it's an important FAQ to get, whether that's on the facilities, website that Melissa is doing an exceptional job with, or, something that we can literally read off or put out to the community somehow. But I think that's where it gets really muddy, and I think that's where people get confused.
Yes.
We need to fix that.
Yeah,
So
and it's there are some statutory components to that as well, because it's something.
I was talking to Jared about this a little bit in depth, and we have Fund 46 set aside for capital improvements. And that's coming out of our regular, our operational budget. And we set aside, we budget certain dollars to go towards Fund 46 for improvements. However, the magnitude of the maintenance that we need to endure is not going to even, Fund 46 would never touch it. Not even the smallest project in here. So that's why we need to go to a capital referendum for maintenance. And it's not for a lack of planning, it's just we have an aging infrastructure within our district.
For the maintenance only option.
For maintenance and less support from the state to provide those maintenance dollars to fix those buildings. So that's what I gathered from that conversation.
Thank you.
And I do have a one pager that we had prepared for the board meeting a year ago. That describes the different funding options as well as types of referenda, as well as has dates for 25, 26, 27. And so what we can shop it back through the sources we were consulting with to make sure that all of this information is still correct. I don't believe any of the statute has changed. I know there are some things swirling right now in legislative land that could impact some of the language on here, but I don't believe any of that has passed as of yet. So why don't we get that tidied up, if you will, or reviewed, and then we could certainly work with, Jared and the team to get that sent out, or they can add to it whatever they would like as well.
Thank you.
May I propose, as I'll ask an executive question, maybe, for the top three options that we're looking at on the screen, because that's what it ultimately comes down to. And when we're talking about the top three options, we're not saying, what are we doing? People were saying, these are the things we'd like to learn more about. Can we ask about a maintenance only option, a maintenance plus improvement option where you don't close any of the schools, and then a for campus solution where you reduce the elementary schools as an option? I don't think people are very interested in the closure of LEAP from what I hear, but I think that just showing people this is what it would look like would be useful information for them.
Right, no, I'm leaning toward what you're saying. I absolutely agree with a maintenance only, that has to be, that's, I mean, people need to understand and see what overall cost is to continue with the programming that the district provides. And to understand, internalize what those needs are. And the continuous plus improvement, I'm with you. Not sure about the 4-campus solution, but I think I'm with you. I think what was the last one you said?
The 4-campus, which would be a consolidation of elementary schools. And again, I'm not saying that I have an interest in that personally as an individual citizen, but I think that it would be good for people to see a picture of what some consolidation would look like without that kind of larger scale 2 or 1 campus solution. You know what I'm saying?
So do we have a understanding, or can we get some weigh-in on whether or not we need to see a maintenance only? Can we agree that a maintenance only is essential as part of one of the options?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Carl, Dan, Diana, Charity, do we want?
Thanks, Tammy. Yes, I agree.
Yes, I think that needs to be seen.
Well,
I'd rather have one option be taken than no options be taken.
And that's where you make the case for another option you think is better. Is this a good time to bring up the possibility of expanding?
Well,
When the maintenance.
I think that could be part of maintenance plus.
Right, okay.
But I wanted to hear Diana had a thought on that. On maintenance only.
I'm sorry.
No, I just said, yeah, if we're just talking, you just asked the question, do you feel that? Yes.
Would you be able to exit out so you guys will be able to see what I'm typing? If that makes sense, like I'm typing live in this right now, so if you wouldn't mind just getting out of the sharing part of it. Then if they can see the slide, or maybe that's not.
Slide 22.
Yeah. Yeah, right there. Thank you. I know it's not gonna be perfect, but maybe it'll help us to see the same thing, because I wanna make sure I get down what you guys are suggesting.
Thank you.
Yep.
So then, so I think the next option that was proposed was a maintenance plus. I'm not sure if no closures is in the cards for us, but
What if the maintenance plus option was, we would attempt to expand LEAP, the agriculture program, and have the student number, so like the average across the entire district for elementary schools is 279 students per building. Like that's the average based on the maximum numbers. So it could be where we want to maybe double or triple the size or student capacity at LEAP and grow our agriculture program in the district to kind of make that a pillar of our district, that we offer an extensive agriculture program from K through 12, right? Because the middle school and the high school already have strong agricultural programs, correct? So like we could maybe like they would maybe absorb Lincoln student count, not like the building. Where their target capacity is 164. So is it possible to expand the building where it could have a capacity of 220?
Yeah, it's just then, right, Lincoln then would come offline. So we would be.
No, she means expand Lincoln building.
No, I mean Lebanon. I was just saying if we're looking to, we're not looking to increase the bodies in the district, right, with the trajectory of enrollment.
Right. Yeah.
So we'd want to build a facility that would absorb one of the buildings or a
Sure.
number that would equate to a building, right? That would be the long-term plan there.
So I apologize. Were you saying that the Lincoln students would attend at LEAP?
If,
That's what I understood.
yeah, if we need to close the building, or I'm not saying that that's the choice, needs to be Lincoln. I'm just saying as far as the actual student count to increase LEAP by the target of one of these other schools, right?
And the reason that I shared that is just knowing that we have an excess number of potential seats within the district. It would only seem to make sense that if we were expanding a building, then we would retract to be as responsible to not provide additional seats amongst the entire district. That we didn't have any bodies to fill.
Well, there's, we're only, to meet our target goals in the elementary level, we just need 65 students enrolled. So that would be the LEAP campus. To max out our capacity, we would only need 140 more elementary students enrolled.
So maybe this is a good time, although I don't want to completely derail the conversation. So how target capacity and maximum capacity are calculated is based upon current class size, not fire code count, if that's the way you normally say it.
Yeah, so the maximum capacity, that's if we had every single seat filled in every single classroom, which is really, that's really difficult because
Okay,
the same number of kids aren't born every year and then you spread it out
Right.
evenly.
okay, so
So
then, based on the document, then the district is only over over the seat number of students by 65 students, because we actually are over our meet amount in Webster. No, I'm sorry, in one of the schools. Unless it was a typo on my end. Yes,
So-
I'm one,
yes,
I'm just wondering if there has been clarity or definition on what maintenance plus means thus far.
And that's-
That our attempt to do that right now.
We're
Yeah.
discussing.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, because that's a big question.
Right. So I'm hearing that one part of that could be to expand LEAP. Is there another component to that you all wanted me to put down or you wanted us to start to look at?
So I can speak to that generally, and Laura, you might have said this while I stepped out of the room, but I said right after you said that, you read my mind. I think from what I've heard, that people really value kind of the practical skill set for living in Wisconsin, in a more rural part of Wisconsin. People really value that lifestyle, and they want to continue to see that, and they want to continue to see those pragmatic things. So I think if anything, if we're talking about improvements, we should be leaning into the things that the city is interested in. And I think the three big things that are appealing about the district are preparing people to go into specialized trade style fields with STEM studies, preparing students to go into agricultural fields, and the music program is the other one that I hear about quite frequently. So I think whatever kind of improvements we're doing should lean into those three aspects specifically.
And also, I think that we should at least consider, we have lost a lot of kids to choice. And the last person I talked to, about why they choiced out of the district was that they didn't like the options they were given, but they were never offered LEAP. And on hearing about LEAP, they were like, I'd have done that, right? How many other people were never offered that option? And if LEAP is that popular, why are we not choicing into the district? Because we don't have the capacity at this point. Maybe that needs to be a consideration when we look at a facilities plus, because when you bring in choice students, you bring in revenue.
Yeah, the capacity of that building is so small right now. It's basically half section school.
Right.
And the same, I apologize for calling it a first name, but I understand the STEM and the ag for the hands-on part. Can you just bring me along with the music part? I understand having traditions around music and that kind of thing. What careers, if we're kind of thinking about career really, we're talking about kind of career ready right out of high school potentially. And we're seeing that maybe a little bit more of our demographic. Where's the music side of that go once they leave high school?
That's a great question. I think that it's a little bit different when it comes to music. And again, I'm only speaking from what I've heard, which is not what everyone has heard, and it's not all that has been heard by everyone. But I think that what appeals about music to people is, I think that even though people really do want that practical side, I think they still care about, there's a couple of different words for it, a classical education. Liberal arts, I think, carries a lot of weight with it, but I don't know necessarily what else to call it. One of those two. And I think that people do appreciate having an education in certain things that may not be immediately practical, but they do provide you with a greater appreciation of the world and certain elements of the world. And I think that for a lot of people, music is what they really tune into with that, so to speak. I think that obviously, I mean, we have lots of fantastic student art on the walls here. I think that it's true of the other mediums as well, but I think that music is what really connects with people. And again, maybe if I hear from 5 dozen people, they're all going to tell me like no, and they'll end up, you know, maybe I'll hear over time enough that people drown out what I've heard so far. But that's what I've heard, and that's my understanding is people want to be able to appreciate things like that, and they want to be able to be prepared for a practical life. And I know that's certainly the longer I go on, the more I appreciate that, because that's really where things have gone for me as well. And so I resonate a lot with that when I hear people.
Did you hear the polka band?
I love polka.
Me too.
Well, Sam, I think what you said, if I may, it's just what you're saying is like the student experience component. They have to go to learn math, science, reading, and those things, but music provides them a space to want to engage in a different kind of way, which if that can contribute to student satisfaction, that might help lead to student success. I think what I'm confused about at this point is we're talking about facilities and then we're bouncing to programmatically looking at it. Do we have a particular approach that we want to look at collectively as a board, or is it holistic of all of these things, and how do we prioritize? Because I'm hearing ag, music, STEM, which is great because the Skills USA kids are at nationals right now. There are 12 kids that are there. There's definitely a need for that, but then we're talking about the facilities and the neighborhood schools and all those different parts of conversation. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out how do we hone all of these different factors to get to what PRA and Colin need for the purpose of this conversation.
Thank you, Chair. I think is happening, that he's verified, is that we have centered around the idea of crafting 3 kind of proposals, for lack of a better term. One is maintenance only, maintenance plus, and the 4 campus. What I think we're doing now is hopefully, tell me if I'm right, giving PRA and Colin enough information for them to go back and say, this is what maintenance looks like. Here's some things we heard about maintenance plus. This is what that could look like. And here's what we heard about the 4 campus. Let's talk about that. Is that right? Correct.
Thank you, that's good. And I think maybe to Charity's point, so we've heard that a part of maintenance plus might be expanding LEAP. And this other conversation was great, but I guess are there other parts, because part of this for us is yes, knowing programmatically what you want the buildings to do, but do you have other direction for us around maybe the which of the buildings, right? Is it maintaining all of the building portfolio, including the one we sit in? And then what is that plus? So I'm hearing it's expanding LEAP, or is any of maintenance plus also pulling back? I thought I heard you maybe mention that or reference that might be.
Well, yeah,
part of
because
the equation.
I agree we cannot keep 5 buildings open if we're gonna stay on the LEAP, right? If our plan is to make LEAP's footprint larger with student body, right, we would have to close one of the existing schools, right? Would everybody agree with that? So I'm not suggesting which school it should be. I'm just saying the plan should include closing a school if we're going to have LEAP absorb that student body.
And part of that conversation is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. That's coming up in the next month, at least a discussion about that. So I would probably support a option two being LEAP programming within district as maintenance plus. So if that looks like that particular programming happens to be in a different location and that absorbs two schools and you're combining two schools into one, that makes sense. Now, I don't know that doesn't exclude the possibility that LEAP can be out in Lebanon. It doesn't exclude the possibility that it can be in the city limits. But we probably want to hear from the community on what their general support is for any type of a referendum, building referendum around that idea.
And one further question, is it possible, physically possible to expand LEAP? We don't know this.
Sure, yeah,
Yes.
and we've looked at, an option to, first, you'd have to expand it to a one section school. And that included an addition. Once you went beyond that, then it's a much more intrusive, operation on that site because there's a leach field there. That's how the sanitary system is handled. So there's a bigger impact there on that, and then where you put a school as that road curves around and people are moving at a high rate of speed, what's safety look like in that environment, right, in different weather conditions and just period.
What is a one section school?
Yeah, I'm wondering too.
We can bring that back and we can share it with you.
Well, so I think
Oh,
so.
sorry.
No, you're fine. So,
I
I think it is good if we just, I don't want to dwell, I want to be, respectful of your time too, but I think so when we say the word section, we mean how many classrooms per grade level exist in a building. So right now, LEAP does not have even one, they have multi-age classes. So they do not have, a kindergarten class, a first grade class, a second grade
If
class.
that's a one section school is where the classes are all separate.
Correct. So that is a multi-age environment there. And I believe that is also true with some grade levels at STEM. Yes. So you don't, I think that's where we were asked to kind of put based upon your current, well, it's now the just recently passed school year, right? But like, what is available for seats? But this doesn't talk about, maybe some other information that would be useful to the board around things like what is current class size policy. We do talk a little bit about that in here, but not exactly what the class size is at different grade levels that you have or how that's approached. That is a district policy. And then in addition to that, you also, it doesn't show you how many sections or what the configuration is at some of these schools, right? So for instance, like at LEAP and Lincoln STEM, those are different than maybe we would be assuming as a. So those would be things to consider. I guess, are there other?
Thank you, Tammy.
Yes.
She just found.
Oh, did you? Thank you.
Guidelines.
Yeah, how that was,
class sizes
thank
and
you.
everything.
Yes, and those were based on information last year. I don't know if that changed at all in the last 12 months, but that was information 12 months ago that we had. So in case that board policy has changed, those numbers could be slightly different.
Class size policy? Yeah, that is not
That's
changed.
what that is.
Do you have any other information you need to begin to craft the maintenance plus model?
So I think what would be useful is we heard about expanding LEAP. Are there other, as well as, making sure that there are places for specialized trade STEM? We had a good discussion about like music, liberal arts emphasis in some places. Are there any other pieces? Because one way of looking at maintenance plus right now would basically to say, okay, so we're going to do maintenance in all the existing buildings, but then we're going to do something to expand the ability to have LEAP programming beyond what it is right now. Is there anything else? Because when we come back to you, we want to make sure this is developed enough that it's fruitful for the board to look at. Is there anything else?
Yeah, really quick, it's something that we talked about last time, which I think we all talked about it. Middle school is probably one of the toughest spots to go through in the school process, and it's even worse when you don't have any windows and you feel like you're in a prison. So probably some element or idea of what like a redesign to make the middle school more hospitable would be. I think you and I talked about that as well last time you guys spoke.
Yeah, there was a.
What's really interesting is how this part of the conversation, just our last 5-10 minutes has gone. It actually, like, if you just look at the first part of option C, our two campus, we're talking about, and it's not improving the middle school, but how do we potentially bring, how do we consolidate the footprint from an elementary school lens? And one of the first ways that in that option we did that was, okay, do we move the middle schoolers to the high school so that they can get their hands more on that specialized education, hands-on learning? Can we use some of those specialized spaces, or does any benefit from a middle school age level then also benefit the high schoolers? We already have those teachers there. Is there some camaraderie, some development amongst them from a curriculum standpoint? And then what that did was it opens the middle school site to then become a larger elementary school. What if that whole north field, less playgrounds, became an agricultural area? And look at that, the dedication to that program, like right in the heart of the community, you could see it. So just as a, like, it's kind of tiptoeing into one of these, excited to explore these, but just we have a little bit of the makings of it at one of the options.
Yeah, I tried to see what people thought of moving, the LEAP program over to the middle school that was kicked around here earlier, and I thought, well, let's see what people think. It went over like a lead balloon. I can't tell you why, but nobody liked that idea, and they had strong feelings about that.
Did you have other, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd say one of the, if we're talking about maintenance plus, one of the probably essentials at the middle school location is to have another egress going out to Bolton Street.
Oh, I know where, yeah,
Yeah.
we've looked at that, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing that I could see is I don't think that this building is going to be a viable investment of taxpayer dollars for a long period of time. So
Take ESC offline.
take ESC offline and find a suitable solution for that.
So I have down expanding LEAP, middle school improvements or redesign, including a review of kind of site circulation, as well as taking ESC offline and relocating. Are there any other components to maintenance plus you would want to have us?
It's probably semantics, but I wonder if we're expanding LEAP or expanding elementary agricultural programming.
LEAP specifically,
The actual location.
yes, yes, that was very important to people.
Yeah.
And then,
Just, do you think that maybe if it's doable, by all means, if it's doable, that we should have an option? I would like an option where we would keep it where it's at. But if the cost is just astronomical to build up a building, do we want to have an option where part of it is trying to find elementary agriculture programming somewhere in the district, some building that can support that, you know what I'm saying? Cause I'd love to keep LEAP there, but if it's gonna cost, millions and millions of dollars to get it.
or put it, say, someplace, someplace else in the district where we already have land, yes.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Yeah, and then what I was going to ask was, Dr. Burke had talked about efficiencies that need to happen in the buildings, they're just not there. And maybe I think that is appropriate to put in the maintenance plus option, and I couldn't, he could tell you better what those were. Yeah.
I'm sorry, do you mind just going down to the next one? That's where I have it. Sorry about that.
No.
Thank you. I know I've got some typos. I apologize. I will fix them.
And something with building efficiencies is just what's the right size of a school. So if we're building a new school, is the size, or what's the model elementary school that we would strive toward to have the amount of teachers that wouldn't have to travel then potentially between sites?
So sections, so there is a sweet spot. It's a little bit different from district to district, depending upon how you fall in the state school funding formula and all the other fun that goes into that. But that is something that, you know, I know that the district's working on, but that may be important information for you to have as a board too. You know, because there are efficiencies by having 2, 3, 4 sections per grade level in a school. Because you have other costs that then are not there, you know, so things to consider, right? If we're having that conversation about how do our facilities help us in the long term with perhaps some of our operational efficiencies if presented that way, and vice versa, right? Because you want to have operational things that are supported by your facilities.
So would you suggest a one campus model? Is that what you're trying?
No, not at all. I mean, you know, you guys, I believe, based on the numbers we've been working with the district,
Sure.
you have about 10 sections per grade level you want to prepare for at the elementary level.
Gotcha.
So when we talk about a building like LEAP, which doesn't even have one, right? It has about 50% of a section. There's different math that goes into, that's why like on this very last page of the skinny here, the easier one to hold. You know, when you look at the maintenance cost per student per square foot, you see that huge fluctuation, and LEAP is at $4.58. Again, this is based on last year's enrollment numbers, but that's why, right? Is because you have a very small population of students per square foot in that building space. Whereas in some of your other buildings that are 3-section buildings right now, so there's 3 classrooms per grade level, you have other efficiencies in that. And some of it does come from less, you know, elective staff having to travel around town, right? Like an art teacher or a, you know, different. So I'm not here to say exactly what those are in Watertown, but I think given the other tenor of the earlier conversation and all of us understanding what Watertown's operational needs are, I think at some point there's probably a nexus and marriage of some of those kinds of data pieces with evaluation, right, of how some of these options stack up for what the needs are now and what you can reasonably expect.
And sorry.
Oh, you're good.
So coming back to my question about the CEM versus the LEED certified energy manager, I'm reading the definition here. Focuses on energy management and efficiency within buildings versus LEED, which is a certification in a green building rating system. So when we're talking about maintenance plus, we're really talking about the certified energy manager, what they do for upgrades to make something more efficient when you're replacing a piece of equipment. And Kevin can explain this. We've had this conversation.
Yes.
Kevin knows probably way more than I do about this, but I think that we need to be aware that when we're making changes, we need to be very mindful of when we replace a piece of equipment, we need to know how much more, how much less electricity or energy in general that is going to use. And there are good choices that can be made that are often overlooked, especially in school districts. And so that should be a consideration in here, an intentional consideration, because we're not building a new building. We're looking at improvements, and this is where we need to look at.
Absolutely. And where I just put that, in case you're wondering, because you're not seeing it getting put, I have, just like we did last time with a rolling question log, I put that in there for us rather than on this slide. So it has been captured. I just, if you're wondering,
Okay.
she was typing, but it's not up there.
No, that's okay. I won't forget.
Okay. Maybe can I just ask a question about this maintenance plus, as you volunteered that an eye for efficiencies in buildings, kind of what Jared had been, or Dr. Burke had been talking about. I guess we had spoken last time about how in the reporting accessibility is in improvements, not in maintenance. So I want to just ask, is that something that you're wanting to see addressed in this, or, you know, where does that fall for you in the options we'd be.
As far as accessibility in our existing buildings.
I guess let me
Yeah.
share that if we're doing a maintenance plus, I wanna keep you safe and I need. To feel comfortable as being a licensed architect, I need to keep you safe and that you need to understand what those dollars are. If we wanna like. Have it as like, here's the line item of what it is, I would feel maybe comfortable with that, but I don't think we should extract it.
No.
Like if we're doing maintenance
Yeah.
plus, then we need to just make sure that we're accommodating that, because if there is a project that go forward. You're gonna have to spend some of your dollars for it, and if that was like kind of just like put on the side and then we didn't have it. Then people are gonna be really upset when we have to forego something. To be able to do that, because the state would require that we do that.
Right.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be part of maintenance plus.
Okay.
Why don't we go to the other one and hear what this is and get that down, and then if there's any other thoughts that get generated, we can certainly scoot back if that works for everyone. So what I thought I heard you say was a 4-campus solution. If someone wouldn't mind advancing the slide for me over there, thank you. Yep, just right there, thank you. So this, I think, was spoken about at the same time. I don't know what this is. So what would the campuses be?
So I think that just based on size, what we would be looking at. And again, it's not necessarily something that the board is interested in themselves, but it's good to get information about different scenarios out there. The remaining campuses would be Douglas, either Schurz or Webster, and then Riverside and high school. So
It's 5. Oh,
that's 5. So it would be basically, because they're the smallest, because of what we've discussed with students, Lincoln and Lebanon would be the first that would drop off, and then there would have to be a remaining school that would drop off, but you would keep the middle school and you'd keep the high school. So I think we would have to kind of look at between Douglas, Schurz, and Webster, which one would be the most reasonable to disperse into the remaining 2, you know what I'm saying? Phrasing it a little.
Well, and in a 4-campus solution doesn't mean that there needs to be one building on each campus. No,
that is probably more expensive than looking at that higher cost.
If we did a 4-campus solution and we just like consolidated the elementary school, Sam, we would need to add an expansion to an elementary school to absorb 3 other campuses.
Yeah.
Or would RMS condense to Watertown High School, and then RMS becomes a destination for the closed elementaries? Is that potentially a proposal based on seats? Because I know in the 1 campus and 2 campus model, they were condensing middle school and ESC to the high school location. So just seeking clarification, wondering if anybody had any thoughts.
I would assume on those options, there was some sort of expansion to the high school, just because like, based on numbers, we couldn't absorb the middle school right now into the high school. There's not enough.
Not quite, no.
So again, what the option we're talking about right now is, option C, 2 campus, and it's phase 1.
Is like aligned with what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, if the middle schoolers went to the high school and right, that connection can be as direct, or it can be a separate building right next to it. And then the middle school would be repurposed.
Do we have any middle schools that have enough land nearby to put the second middle school? Or
I'm
to
sorry, do you
expand
mean in your district, or do you mean in area districts who've done that?
in our district?
do we have any space, you mean?
Yeah, for expanding,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it was just a dumb question.
So I think this is probably your option C is has the intention of expanding the high school to adapt to the middle school and the ESC.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You could, yeah, so I guess in answer to your question, you could definitely add on to the high school. We'll call it the site, right? You could either make it so that there's commingling, like you're tearing down a wall and expanding out like a wing. You can have it so that they just exist on the same site, so it's maybe more efficient for busing or for other things that come up. Again, staffing pieces, some of those. Or, you know, we see, I guess we would call it a hybrid approach, right? Some districts where they share some of that very specialized space, you know, think of your culinary arts or some of your other spaces that are really expensive and specialized to build. Some schools, they don't schedule the kids in there at the same time of the day, right? You might have your middle school with specials in the morning or vice versa with your high school kids. But there are plenty of districts in Wisconsin who are doing that, and it looks different depending upon district things. You also have the land to the north. So you could have it right, like just right there where the kids all have access to the track and some of those things that are right out the back door of the high school. However, you could also build it elsewhere on the property. Conceptually, like you do have the land to do that.
while we're kind of on that topic of what looks like on one campus, not saying that we have to go down the route of one campus solution. But in handout A, number 12, the first link for that's under 12, it says unique campus setting map.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That is an example of a one campus solution where you have shared areas and there are 4 buildings on that campus. So, you know, it's not, you know, you could expand a high school and still utilize those same facilities for other usage.
Mhm.
And if you're going to the north of the high school, you're still technically on the same campus.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, there's the traffic issue though.
Right. Which we can figure that out, I think.
I'm also very,
Yeah, the high school, I was under the impression that the high school is readily available to build onto.
Mhm.
Is that true?
Yeah,
If you want to
It
do it,
is
you can do it.
absolutely.
And which directions can you go?
The easiest is gonna be to the west,
Mhm.
To the south?
Mm,
to the west and the south, I guess.
It's,
Oh, stay away from the stadium, stay away from your tracking your,
Oh, I see, okay.
yeah, so
Very
there's like
good.
a
yeah.
couple options over there depending upon what you attached or didn't choose to attach.
And then the other parcel of land that we've looked at in the past is right north of Endeavor Drive on the other side of that steep hill that's currently being utilized by the ag program. That there's a few acres. And to this point, we've only looked at an elementary school on that site. We're currently wrapping up in August. And for this first day of school for this next calendar year, 2 different middle high schools. One in Howard's Grove and one in Rosendale Brandon. So also rural communities.
you said it was a middle school, high school?
A middle high school, yeah.
I think that, in all honesty, I think that might be a better option. I think parents would be more willing to have a larger school building to send their children to the older that they are. I think parents generally like to send their smaller children to smaller neighborhood schools than like one mass. Yeah, it's a little intimidating their first day of 4K.
I agree, yeah, as long as we can get the traffic issues sorted out.
I agree with you. But I'm struggling with this. It seems to indicate that Riverside Middle School, the maintenance cost per square foot is 21 cents. Yeah,
I mean, we kind of talked at the beginning about where the community is and what they're interested in.
yeah,
And I feel like what the community has repeatedly stated is that they're not interested in the consolidation of grades. I think that a mild consolidation is something that we could present, but I think that if we say, hey, this is what it looks like to move the middle school to the high school, I think that does not seem like something people are interested in from what I've heard. Again, though, I mean, Lori, you've brought a lot of interesting new perspective on that subject, and I know it was something you were heavily interested in before you were on the board. Would you say that there was an openness to the idea of doing a 6 through 12 or a 7 through 12 at the high school?
It wasn't really discussed. I think it's an intriguing idea.
It'd be worthwhile to at least put out the idea there.
Yeah.
I think it'd be easier to present it to the community. I don't want to say sell it, like we're selling a bad product here.
Right.
I don't mean it that way, but I think parents, it would be easier for them to consider a consolidation of middle and high school than telling parents who are, especially young parent, or not young parents, but parents that have younger children that are in a place where they're having to put their children into a school district. It might be easier for them to know they're going to a neighborhood school instead of big new build up on the hill. You know, that might be a little intense for a parent to.
I think it's worth discussing with parents. We know what they don't want. They don't want us to consolidate their neighborhood schools. But we haven't really discussed what they do want.
Is there a scenario where Riverside Middle School, I mean, that location is a neighborhood school?
It's a possibility.
Because it seems like that happens to have some of the best space that we have as a district. The traffic situation can be cleared up relatively easily. We already have a pool that's already built. And, you know, that may also mean that you can consolidate 3 other buildings into that one.
So how would the traffic problem at Riverside be cleared up?
Easy.
Yeah.
Very easy.
Oh, there you go.
Very easy. All you'd have to do is, where my bar is there, put a roundabout. And then with one more road going out on Bolton Street.
So it's a simple problem.
You bet.
You mean where the physical building is right now?
Yes, you bet.
Okay.
Put a roundabout in there.
Yeah.
So I make some more money.
If I could just jump in, please. I know it's hard to see the hand is raised and things like that. I want to bring us back to the fact, I don't know if Jared's still there or not, but we have to remember that the community spoke loud and clear about they're very frugal and don't want taxes raised, so we've had a lot of great discussion on what our hopes and desires are. I think we should get back to what direction do we want for PRA to come back with us. I'd like to see price tags with it and the impact on the community, because we can put our wishes all we want. And that's what we did a year ago. Kind of the pie in the sky. Here's where we're going. Initial discussion, moving from there. We heard the first round of the referendum. We heard that loud and clear. And so with that, we're doing this in conjunction with that ask. So we have to keep that in mind also. It's not just the facilities piece that we're talking about. We have to consider the fact that, yes, there's going to be some closures of buildings. And yes, we do need to have room to add on if people do move in and some classes are bigger than others. And we have to consider the need to be able to share supports, whether that be 4 or 5 of a given grade level in a similar building, or to share a special ed teacher or whatever that may be, because the reality is with the funding formula as it is, we will be having struggles financially, because with the ask, even when we asked 7 million, that was not to get us ahead. That was to keep us barely afloat. And so we have to be very cost sensitive, efficient, yet I agree with all of the desires that we have. Now I'm just going to ask us to pull back in to what is going to be a reasonable ask, not only from our community, but for us to ask from our district administrators to put this function forward to provide the needs that we have for our students. So I have been kicked in and out of this meeting due to some Wi-Fi issues right now. I have to leave at this point in time. I just wanted to state that before I go. So I'm sorry for interrupting in that. I just wanted to make sure that that was heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. So,
To help you create a floor building or floor campus model.
so tell me if I'm okay and what I'm hearing, and because I think we've had a couple different ideas about this. So I'm actually starting at the bottom if that works for you. So with the campuses, I'm wondering if as we go back as a team and do some work, it's the high school campus stays as a campus. But looking at that either as just the high school or potentially a joint site with middle school brought onto the campus someplace. So that would be like a campus. The middle school site remaining as either a middle school or perhaps being repurposed into, you know, I think I just heard somebody say 2 or 3 of the current elementary schools would fit in that building.
Yep.
So, you know, like we're looking at that. Then we're looking at kind of reviewing from some of the options that have been vetted, but also taking in any new information from the district, but looking at kind of Douglas, Schurz, Webster, you know, of those 3, maybe what those other sites look like, site or sites. So that even if we went to, let's say, the current middle school site became an elementary school, for instance, you still would have additional sites for elementary in other locations around the district.
So being fiscally responsible here
Mhm.
with our maintenance plus, we need to understand what the savings are with our new plan fiscally versus the maintenance, the straight cost maintenance. Where are we saving money by adding all these improvements? So I'd like to see that in the maintenance plus. Like, what are we getting for our money and how much money are we spending as opposed to just the maintenance?
And can I follow up on that? Because I think that's kind of the same question I asked last time. And I think what it comes down to, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding is no matter how you cut it, if you're doing more than maintenance, it's going to cost more. Even if you're taking into account some savings on potential maintenance items that you do not have to complete, you're still going to be spending more overall. It's going to be larger. But I think that the appeal of this is we are talking about 3 different options. The purpose is not to say we're going to present any given one of these. The purpose is any of these are going to cost some dollar amount. At this point, you have those 3 options and you go, hey, this is something that we're looking at down the line, just because it's a reality that money will need to be spent. What are people interested in? And you can present those 3 options. You know, you have the 4 campus solution, you have a maintenance plus, which is kind of if people want to expand and keep the structures that they currently have, and then you have a maintenance only, which is a flanging option, which might be the one that people want. I think Carl was speaking to that earlier, and that would be my inclination as well, that that's where people would want to go. But it's worthwhile for people to have all of those options so they understand this is where we stand.
But you see, but would like to see the apples to apples. This option is gonna cost this much more or less
So
than this option.
we can absolutely do that. When it comes to like operations, and building heating and cooling, we can't get to that detail because part of that is like, right, we've done maintenance, and if the building doesn't have AC, we've not planned on it having AC. Typically in new buildings, they come with AC. If you add AC to any kind of building, it's gonna cost more, because that's a cooling load that you didn't have before. So I guess if we're talking about straight, operational or utility bills, we won't be able to get into any kind of calculation with
But
that.
we could probably come up with something like that because we just put air conditioning into Schurz and Douglas.
So if I can jump in, the hard part with that is, that's also a question of cost.
We could do like, we talk about an operational, what it costs us per month for utility. We could jump on the Oregon bus and put a significant investment in capital to be net zero energy wise, right? That's gonna significantly reduce our energy costs in an operational capacity. We could also spend as little as possible and, put in regular or standard efficiency boilers, things like that, to save money on the capital side and then pay up the nose on our operational. So that's why it's really hard to give you what you're asking for with these straight apples to apples without having those guidelines.
So I wasn't asking for a drill down that far.
Okay.
I was asking for, what's it gonna cost you? What's it gonna cost the taxpayer? Like, the mill rate, right?
Yep.
With these different options that would be cost benefit analysis. Because we've seen.
I apologize, I misunderstood the question.
It's okay, yeah. So we've seen a lot of shiny pages here. And we've seen some good data. But we're not seeing for the forest for the trees here in general. There's a lot to digest. There's a lot to slog through. The public is not gonna wanna do this, they do not have the time for this. They need what is it gonna cost me? What's the benefit? And these are the three options.
To that point, I'm wondering if I can attempt to summarize what I think are the two to-dos for our friends here. One is to develop some ideas around maintenance plus, and a 4-campus model with as many dollars and cents that they can be at this point. And then the second big to-do I wrote down was timelining, working backwards, what a capital referendum timeline would look month to month, looking at November of 2026 for the question. Is that right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Tentative.
Just looking at what it would look like and when it starts, when the conversation starts. Any other requests for PRA and Cullen as we look towards our next session?
One, wouldn't it be much cheaper to build onto that school because it's ready for it? Because of the high school, it would be much cheaper, right? To go out from one of your wings that already been there, because of, I would imagine that the heating and cooling should be there already, right? No,
Usually, no, it's like, right, you don't wanna spend more money than you need to when you start. So no one wants to build that in, just like a lot of times people think you can go up with building construction. It does cost a premium. It might not be as much as people think, but if you don't do it and spend the extra, then it costs a lot more to do it later. So any kind of sizable addition, or really any kind of addition period, would have all of its own services in my side of things, guys.
Yeah, I would agree with from a utility standpoint, and utilities all size, you might say my sanitary, my sewer. Now, with some of the code restrictions that run off of water, we still have to do all that work that I'd say maybe in the past, maybe you wouldn't have had to do. So it's hard to say, it's as straightforward as you can say.
Is adding on to a newer building probably easier than an older structure? I would say yes, that would likely be easier. Just because of, if you did tie anything between the two buildings, likely there's more area above the ceiling. You can begin to think about doing that. What kind of system might be shared if there was any?
And the site at the high school is, I mean, imagine trying to do construction on Lincoln and its location in the community, right? Versus like what you have the ability to do at a place like the high school by comparison. So define easier, right? But I mean, it depends on how you, yes, but there would be, yes. So this is where we also wanted to get a quick bit of input if we can. I know that we have some pieces coming up, and it's also possible, respecting that the board does not feel like decisions on this can be made tonight. But wanted to kind of turn over to Sean to talk a little bit about maybe back to how we started, which is how can we better engage the community as this ramps up again?
Okay. We really had a lot of good discussions and talking about this specifically. So before that, we kind of came up with this plan for how we wanted to engage the community. Looking at those options, the August 28th, 8 through 10, they all Watertown staff. That one we've looked at, and that one is pretty well down the path of let's get some engagement from our staff. These other community ones, that's what we're really looking for you guys to say, all right, hey, we've got these options, you're gonna come back from this date, let's start grabbing some of those information, some of that feedback from the community. Within those, that aspect, I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but what do you guys see as the best practice, the best way to get that community feedback? There has been in the past year some attempts to, and some of those that were involved previously, some of those just weren't well attended by the community. So we need to think about better strategies, getting in front of them. As you talked about earlier, I know looking at going from the hybrid model to more of a community-based one, that's really what we're going to be kind of coming together with, figuring that stuff out and putting into those plans. Obviously, we want to get some dates in front of us, but I want to get your guys' feedback on, hey, per these discussions we've had tonight, we really need to take a break from that. Why don't you get this information back? Let us digest, and we can kind of start to set up some of those community outreach dates. So what are your guys' ideas for when we want to start engaging the community?
Well, I think as board members, I think we will be doing this immediately. I think that's our role as elected officials. And I think that's the best first step. And then we can go from there. I think planning too far ahead on something leaves out course correction. And that's just my opinion.
I like what I heard with the host homes, that we find key members in the community and they host neighbors, people they know from work and stuff. I think that's what got us that new high school. And I think if the community takes the lead on it, like your idea, Lori, that, we listen to them, I think it's always going to be kind of hybrid-y in a sense, but we lost that referendum by a lot. And so we really need the community to take the reins and run that. So I would like to see us, all of us, think of people that would really have, make an impact by hosting in their homes, I guess.
I'm a little hesitant to suggest time frames on this because of the failed referendum. I see a lot going on with our community that can be promising when it comes to development on the south side of the city. And I think that growth is needed. And that will tell us a lot of where our community is headed. It's a matter of timing though. I think that you're right, engaging the community early and often and discussing this is a good thing. However, it's easy for the community to misconstrue that as, oh, you're gonna hit us with an operational referendum and then you're gonna sock us with a building referendum. Watch. Because that's exactly what happened last time. And it's like that's not what we're intending at all. We're trying to intend for a long term.
But that's we're asking them what they want. We're not telling them what we think is good for them.
I know, and that's the way we felt last.
That's the difference. Yeah.
I guess as far as me as it goes to planning, I'd like to wait, because the conversation should be coming up on if we're gonna be taking our initial referendum or an operational referendum to the ballot, right? Well, the board hasn't decided that yet. And if we vote that we are gonna take it to the ballot box in April, it might be good to align those meetings together. So it can be made clear in all the meetings together that these are two separate things. We are going to be taking option A to referendum in April, and we're getting a feeling, a sense of where the community might land on long-term maintenance goals or long-term, capital goals. But I hesitate committing to any date until the board is decided on our operational referendum.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so it sounds like you all want to take some time, right? We'll do the homework that was asked of us, and in the meantime, we'll just hold on this as possibilities and see kind of where things go from
Yes.
here.
One more question. Was there a census projection included in this?
Yes,
There is a third party consultant worked with the district and the Roffers.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
that,
and we have that information.
yes,
Very good. Thank you.
yes.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for your feedback.
One thing I'll just add, as you look at that timeline, great with pausing and all that stuff, but as you're looking at that timeline between now and when we meet next, you can easily look and say, all right, we need to start engaging at this point, at this point.
Okay.
So you guys can use that as a guide as you're trying to decide what are the dates that we actually want to submit questions on. So
Right. Yes, and so what you have, it's really a difference of basically 6 months. So we will certainly update a timeline for you, but if in your mind you're wondering between now and then, what does that look like? Really, it's just +6. So I think the part that you're really gonna want to spend some time thinking about is how do you have a separate message, but the same information like you were just talking about? But how do you get community-wide survey data for a capital referendum? That is really important to do. We really see a congruence between what community-wide is, and it's literally facilitated mailed to every different mailbox in your home, in all the homes. And that tends to tell you what will or won't work on a ballot. Now, districts do it sometimes for operational, but they especially do it for capital. So that we don't do that work directly. We work with people who do that work. So they would have to give you a quote.
Mailers are not cheap.
Yeah.
No, but the whole survey process, there's mailers that your district may choose to do for, community engagement. And that is, we've found very beneficial too. We understand social media and things, but not everybody's on social media. And so that's something where in your own district, you probably have a sense for what percentage of people like to get news from radio, TV, your daily, different newspaper, different sources. That's kind of information that's useful to have because you still, we would recommend you doing a community-wide survey that does get mailed into everybody because they respond and then and there are very few communities who've done that. And when they heed what the community says in that survey results, they are far, far, far more often than not successful because they're determining tax threshold. To your point earlier, Lori, about mill rate, like that's how the questions are asked, right? You might be giving multiple options, but you're usually giving a mill rate attached and a time frame like phasing. There's a lot of really good ways. These companies are very sophisticated because it is what they do. It's their bread and butter. So I'm not here to promote one specific company, but just to let you know, I think it's worth on the timeline when you look at that again, realizing that that's built in there because it's a very good opportunity for your district to make the right choice or know if this is the right time at all or not for your district.
So I think I feel that this was a productive meeting. I feel like we got down to 3 options as a board, based on what the temperature of our community that we feel. And we have an idea of the timeline. Was there anything that we missed? All right.
Appreciate the
Thank you all
feedback.
very much for your feedback and time. We do
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Excellent. So,
All right.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week.
You too.
Yeah,
So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Please and I will talk about that on.
On the second.
I'll second.
I hear a motion was moved, it was moved by Sam and seconded by Carl to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, we stand adjourned.
It's my son. I don't, this happens all the time. Anytime I go to. Better to expect it.
I'm gonna be.
You were.